Peace, friends of refined investing. Today, of course, with a new video again. Today, we're going to take a look at the 4 strongest altcoin crypto projects that I prioritize and favor the most for the next bull run. I think most of you already have an idea of what this is about. On the one hand, of course, XRP, and on the other, XLM. Then we also have Link and HBAR or Hedera HBAR, call it whatever you like. Yes, today we'll also be talking about various price predictions, but not about any completely wild moon targets or anything like that, just about being able to realistically or slightly bullishly estimate zones that could theoretically be reached in the next bull run. For me, XRP is still at the very top, but I also find XLM, Chainlink, and Hedera extremely interesting right now, or actually they've been interesting for a while, because they really fit the direction in which the crypto market is currently developing, namely tokenization, settlement, data, enterprise infrastructure, and of course clear regulation, where we're currently just taking more and more of the next steps. And I mean, especially with topics like the Clarity Act, for example, there's currently a lot of discussion about whether much higher prices might actually be possible for utility coins. And of course, in the long term, that's certainly possible. A lot more could certainly happen. But at the end of the day, you still have to keep everything clean, you know? I mean, regulation isn't a button that someone just presses and then the next day all of our projects do a 10x, right? That's why today we're definitely going to take a look at why I currently find these 4 altcoins the strongest and what role the Clarity Act could play, because I keep seeing a lot about it lately and I think some people are still misunderstanding it. And of course, make sure to give a thumbs up. It would really support me a lot. I'd really appreciate it. And for everyone who's new here, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. You can see my crypto campus in the background, of course. Feel free to check it out. In the mornings, you'll always get your daily crypto analysis here, updated every morning at 7 o'clock. You can just open it here and check out what's currently happening on the market. For anyone interested in having their portfolio evaluated, you can get that done very affordably with us, comparatively speaking. Check it out, I'd really appreciate it. A lot of time has gone into it. But now let's really get started with the video. I mean, the next bull run will most likely play out very differently from what we saw in 2021. Back then, almost everything pumped. As soon as there was enough liquidity in the market, we had NFTs, we had gaming, we had the metaverse, we had DeFi, and we had all sorts of coins with weird logos, etc. that just went along for the ride. This time, though, I'm paying more attention to which projects could actually find a place in the real financial world. So it's not just about who has the most vocal community, but above all, who is actually solving a problem, a real-world problem. Who will be needed when all assets are tokenized in the future? Who provides the necessary data, liquidity, or settlement? And that's exactly how we end up pretty quickly with these 4 projects, XRP, XLM, Link, and HBAR. So all 4 are completely different, or in the case of XLM, of course, there are some parallels, but all 4 are working on topics that could become really big in the crypto market over the next few years. Before we dive into the individual coins, we of course first need to briefly talk about the Clarity Act. I mean, as I said, you currently read a lot about it in the comments. A lot of people write things like, when the Clarity Act comes, XRP and so on will absolutely skyrocket. And I mean, sure, regulation can of course be a significant and substantial advantage, especially for coins that are leading the industry when it comes to infrastructure, institutional use, or market integration and various other factors. Because, I mean, big banks, asset managers, and companies just hate uncertainty. They just want to know, what is a digital commodity? What is a security? What rules apply to exchanges? What obligations do platforms have? And who is actually responsible? Is the SEC responsible now, or is it the CFTC? And that's exactly where the Clarity Act can really help. But now, of course, comes the important point. So that doesn't automatically mean that on the day the law passes, everything will suddenly explode, right? I mean, regulation is more like a road that's being built. Just because the road is finished doesn't mean that all the trucks will suddenly start driving at the same time overnight. But of course, without a road, no one sets off at all. And that's why, for me, the Clarity Act isn't some kind of 10 times button or anything like that, but rather a possible door opener for more legal certainty, more institutional trust, more listings, more products as well, and of course, more capital that would even dare to enter the market in the first place. In the long term, of course, this could also enable higher prices, but right now we're simply not at the point where you can say, hey, everything's settled, now the price explosion is guaranteed. You really have to be experienced or just realistic about it, right? Let's start with XRP. I mean, for me, XRP remains one of the most exciting projects in the crypto market, especially when it comes to value transfers, liquidity, and so on. Not because XRP is going to pay for your bread at the bakery tomorrow or anything like that. That's not what it's about at all. The much bigger question is, can XRP help in the background to move value faster between banks, markets, and generally between systems? And that's exactly where I see the strength of XRP. I mean, we're seeing more and more topics around tokenized assets, stable coins, treasury products, and simply institutional settlement. And XRP was designed from the very beginning with this direction in mind: fast value transfers, liquidity, settlement. So that's exactly the area that becomes exciting as financial markets become increasingly digitalized. I mean, the Clarity Act would of course be especially interesting for XRP because XRP has suffered for years under all these regulatory uncertainties. We've seen it ourselves over the past few years. And if the US could provide more clarity here, it could really ease the market significantly. But again, it's not a magic button, right? So XRP doesn't just need clarity, but also strong usage, liquidity, and demand. Still, for me, XRP remains the clear number one in this group of four, but you also have to look at it realistically here, right? But let's move on to the XRP price zone. I mean, I'm deliberately staying extremely realistic, just like I have in the past few years. If XRP is once again more widely recognized in the next strong bull run, regulatory clarity increases and institutional capital flows more strongly into the market, then I definitely see a conservative price of $4 to $5 as realistic. And that would, of course, already be impressive. So not crazy, not exaggerated, but really a range that for XRP in a good overall market really seems achievable. For a much more bullish forecast, something between $7 and $11 would also be realistic, but for that, a lot more needs to come together. There needs to be an extremely strong crypto market, significantly more regulatory certainty needs to be in place, more institutional products need to exist, more real demand, and simply a market that once again values XRP as an infrastructure asset. Higher prices are, of course, not ruled out in the long term, higher than this forecast now, especially if tokenization, banking infrastructure, and global liquidity really do grow significantly. But yes, for the next bull run, I wouldn't act as if $50, $100, $500, or anything like that is standard. I mean, of course, we can gladly discuss it, but we're just not there yet at the moment. But of course, it depends extremely on how the whole thing is planned by various big players, right? When is all of this supposed to be implemented? That could happen in 2 years, it could happen in 5 years, or it might not happen for another 10 years. We just don't know, right? So I'm not one of them, unfortunately, at least in this regard. Of course, I'd love to know what's being discussed behind the scenes, but we just have to speculate about that, right? And that's why I always find it much more serious to set expectations lower rather than talking about something like $100 now. That just doesn't make any sense at the moment. Of course, we're all invested in XRP and would be happy if it skyrocketed, but we can't forget where the project currently stands and how much capital, etc., is already in the project. Other people can keep saying things like, yeah, but you're forgetting this and you're forgetting that. No, I've actually got all of that very, very well covered. Believe me on that. Look, I don't work a 9-to-5 job and barely have time to deal with these topics. I'm really deeply involved in this, and I think most of the people who always argue against it just don't have as much time for it and often simply don't understand exactly what it's about. They don't have any real financial understanding of it, and I don't think they have any idea what would actually need to happen for XRP to reach $100. Seriously, a lot of the time people are just blindly repeating what they've heard from others, and yeah, it just sounds cool. Oh, then I'll be rich. Oh, Lambo tomorrow. Yeah, that's how it's going to happen, right? That's not how the world works. But let's move on to XLM. I mean, Stellar is often seen as the little brother of XRP. It's a bit simplistic, but the connection is valid, I mean, XLM is also in the area of payments, settlement, financial infrastructure, and so on. What makes XLM particularly interesting, in my opinion, is the topic of tokenization. I mean, when major market infrastructures or financial service providers work with Stellar, it shows that Stellar isn't just seen as an old coin from some past cycles, but as a network that can play a huge role in the area of digital assets in the future. But with XLM, you really have to do the math extremely carefully. A lot of people just look at the low price here and say, if XRP can go up, then XLM can easily reach $5 to $10 too. Yeah, but it's just not that simple here, With XLM, the circulating supply is extremely important. We already talked about this in the last video. The more coins are in circulation, the more market capitalization you simply need for the same price. And that's exactly why with XLM, you really have to clearly distinguish between a good story and realistic price calculations. I see XLM conservatively in a range of about 49 to 67 cents in the next major bull run. That might sound boring to some at first, but if we look at today's prices, that's still a lot of profit. Of course, not if you only invested like 50 euros, obviously. But we shouldn't forget where XLM already stands, and we can't just assume that every altcoin will suddenly do a 10x and all ATHs will be broken, etc. We won't see that anymore. The market has changed drastically, and yes, a lot of people are still stuck in the old projects, clinging to them, protecting them as if they were their own embryo, but you just have to stay realistic. For some, the train has simply left the station, and some projects will just never reach their ATHs again, as harsh as that sounds. That's just how it is, you know? So, yeah, sometimes you just miss the right moment, and maybe you have to say, you know what, I have no idea, but I'm just going to exit project XY now with a 30% loss, right? Better that than losing 80% later, and you just have to accept that maybe you made one or two bad decisions. I've had to accept that myself several times already. That's just how the market is sometimes. But let's take a look at the more bullish forecast. There I see something between 80 cents and $1, especially if tokenization really takes off and Stellar gets more attention in that narrative. But $5 or $10 for XLM, yeah, you have to be honest. For that to happen, the market capitalization would have to increase extremely, extremely strongly. Not just a little, but as I said, extremely, extremely. And I mean, the Clarity Act could help XLM because clear regulations can simply make institutional use easier here as well. Especially in payment and tokenization networks, legal certainty is extremely important, but here too it's simply the case that first comes clarity, then the products, then the usage, then the capital, and only then might we see significantly higher prices, which by the way many are already talking about again, not the other way around. But now let's talk about Chainlink. I mean, for me, Chainlink is the data and connectivity building block on this list. I mean, when assets go on-chain, it's just not enough to merely placing a token on a blockchain. You need reliable real-world data, you need prices, interest rates, proofs, interfaces, and cross-chain communication, and that's precisely the critical area where Chainlink comes into play. Link is not the same as XRP or XLM. XRP and XLM are more focused on payments, liquidity, and settlement, for example. Chainlink, on the other hand, is more like the layer that connects data and systems. And if the financial world really starts using more tokenized assets, then reliable data will become extremely important in the future. Because I mean, a tokenized fund, for example, a tokenized bond or a tokenized commodity simply needs information from the real world. And this information has to be brought into the blockchain world in a clean, secure, and transparent way. And that's exactly why, for me, Link definitely belongs in this selection. For Link, I conservatively see a range of $30 to $40 in the next bull run. That would already be a strong increase without going completely overboard or anything. If we take a slightly bullish view, I see something between $70 and $100. For that to happen, Chainlink really has to benefit more from the tokenization narrative. CCIP, Oracle's institutional integration, these things not only have to sound good, but also need to be valued by the market, you know. I mean, with the Clarity Act, Link could also benefit, of course, but in a very different way than, say, XRP. With Link, it's less about the old XRP SEC story. It's more about the fact that a clear market structure can push the entire institutional crypto market forward. And I mean, if more regulated products emerge, more tokenization happens, and more financial infrastructure moves on-chain, then you need data and connectivity layers. And of course, Chainlink can benefit from that. But again, you know, that's a thesis, not a guarantee. A lot still needs to happen in the future for that, and it's also a bet on the future in a way. For me, it's one of the most plausible bets, but that doesn't mean it will happen that way. That's just my opinion. I'm convinced of it, but everyone has their own way of thinking. Everyone sees something different as becoming big in the future. That's just my thing, but for me, in the crypto market, it's simply the one with the most foundation and the most potential. Leaving Bitcoin aside for now, you know. Today we're only talking about altcoins. Let's move on to Hedera. HBAR is, for me, a very special case. Many people love Hedera, but many also completely ignore it. I've also talked to many people who've never even heard of it, especially people who aren't really into the topic. But when you talk about enterprise, tokenization, and real-world applications, you at least have to have Hedera on your radar. I mean, Hedera is extremely fast, extremely cheap, and really focused on enterprise applications. The governance model is different from many classic crypto projects. You can like it, but you can also criticize the whole thing. But it's specifically tailored to a certain target group, which could become much more important in the next cycle than many probably expect right now. And it's primarily about companies, institutions, and applications with real transaction volume. With Hedera, it's not about being the wildest DeFi playground or anything like that. It is simply about infrastructure for real-world processes, tokenization, secure digital identity, robust enterprise applications, and traceability. And that's exactly why, in my opinion, HBAR fits extremely well into this package. For HBAR, I conservatively see a range of 22 to 26 cents. It might not sound like a typical YouTube Moon video or anything like that, but if you look at the current prices, it would still be a very strong increase. Now, if we are slightly more bullish, we could see it somewhere between 40 and 55 cents. in my own personal opinion based on the current outlook. A new all-time high is of course also possible in the long term, but for that, the market would really have to value Hedera much, much higher, just value it more strongly. And I mean, here too, the Clarity Act can of course help indirectly, not because HBAR has to skyrocket the next day or anything, but because companies and institutions are more likely to work with networks when the legal environment becomes much clearer. Especially enterprise crypto requires an extreme amount of trust. And of course, we also have a lot of this old money, or rather all these traditional investors from the stock market who are increasingly eyeing the crypto market, but are currently still put off because they still see all this chaos, you know? And for them, it's simply a matter of uncertainty, and for them, it's not about putting 50 euros a month into HBAR or into HBAR, but rather about investing 100,000, 500,000, or even 5 million at a time. And in that case, you really think 3 times about whether to do it, especially if there are still 1 or 2 things hanging in the air that don't look very clean or are still a bit messy, you know? And I mean, nobody likes to build on an infrastructure where it's unclear what authority will judge it and how come tomorrow. And that's very, very off-putting for many people. That's why regulation can definitely be an advantage for HBAR, but in the end, usage still simply has to happen, you know? A good law doesn't replace demand at the end of the day. And now, of course, the big question, why exactly these 4 different projects? I mean, for me, they each cover different aspects of development for now. XRP stands for liquidity and settlement. XLM stands for payments and tokenization. With Link, we have someone who can act for data and the connection between systems. HBAR stands for enterprise infrastructures and fundamentally various applications. So in other words, this isn't just some random mix in my eyes. For me, it's simply a bet that the next big cycle will focus more on infrastructure, not just on some short-term pumps, etc., which simply aren't sustainable. Of course, meme coins will keep pumping from time to time, no question. Of course, some coin will also do a 50 times out of nowhere again. That's just part of crypto. But I don't want to build my entire portfolio on chance timing and some random Twitter booms, you know. I want to hold projects where I at least understand why they might be needed in the tokenized financial world, and that's exactly why I'm currently focusing especially on these 4 projects. But let's get to my conclusion. I mean, XRP, XLM, Link, and HBAR, and I'm still learning too, aren't guaranteed winners or anything for me, but they just fit a market that's gradually and steadily changing. More regulation, more tokenization, more institutional products, and more focus on, well, real infrastructure, Smybe. I mean, sure, as I said, the Clarity Act can be an important building block here, but I would really be careful not to turn this into some kind of overnight price explosion. I mean, yes, clear rules can, of course, make higher valuations possible in the long term. And yes, more institutional capital can enter the market as a result. And yes, projects like XRP, XLM, Link, and HBAR could benefit from this, but the market simply needs time, especially in phases like these. Of course, laws also have to be finalized first. Companies need to build products, capital needs to flow into the market, and I mean, real usage also has to develop first. Feel free to write in the comments what you think about the projects, price predictions, etc. Or say, yeah, come on, get lost, I couldn't care less, go invest in your internet junk, I only have Bitcoin in my portfolio. I'd definitely be interested to hear about it. And otherwise, yeah, I'd say we'll definitely continue again on, well, I don't know, Wednesday, Thursday, something like that. And with that in mind, yeah, don't go too wild. As I said, feel free to check out my crypto campus at MonetenDave.com or CryptoRadar24.de. I'd be happy to see you there. Feel free to check the prices there in the morning. Always take a look at the analysis and so on. And for anyone interested in a portfolio analysis or whatever, check out the products. It's all available on the website as well. With that, see you in a few days. Hang in there and see you soon. Peace, peace.